This isn't about who the prom queen is, right, or the prom king or whatever. It's not about being popular. It's not about a mean girl. It's not about It's about who has that spark, who has that will to live.
Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Reina Creole, and with me is Douglas A. Burton, author of The Heroine's Labyrinth, and we are gonna talk about a horror movie, which I would have to say you can't call yourself a horror fan if you have not seen it. And that film, of course, is Halloween. But
Yes.
before we get started, I would like Doug to introduce himself to all of you in case you guys have not seen a stream with him before.
Well, thank you, Lorena. My name is Douglas A. Burton, and I'm an author. And I have been enjoying a lot of discussions on YouTube these days. There's so much to talk about in pop culture, and Lorena is right on the pulse there for a lot of these spicy topics, and also the good and the bad. One thing I like about Lorena is that she's always, she's willing to be critical about things that deserve it, but she's never wanting to go all the way where she's always going to be critical about things. She's trying to find the right balance there, and I think that that's very important for all of us to try to maintain that spirit. So anyway, the book that I wrote is called The Heroine's Labyrinth. That's the most recent book, and it's an alternative to the hero's journey, and it's a study of heroic women in fiction. And so that's a spicy topic at times if people want it to be. But there's also a lot of good there, and I like to focus on the good things, the archetypal power found in heroine-centric stories. And horror, we have a lot of heroine-centric films and stories in the horror genre.
Yes, we do, which is why I'm glad to have Douglas on, because it's like I've seen him talk about The Heroine's Labyrinth over on Retro's channel, and a lot of it is, those awesome pop culture movies. But for me, I'm like a little different. I'm like, I wonder how that would apply with respect to horror, because Halloween, this movie, and I'm gonna actually mute this right here. This movie, I have never been like the same since since seeing this film. I remember seeing this film, I want to say, I think by the time I finally saw it, because my parents didn't have cable, I think I was like 15 or something like that. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, this crazy stalker guy. And then you have the babysitter at
Yep.
home with kids she's supposed to have to watch, and it's gone from, hey, there's nothing really that's going on, and just make sure they don't eat enough, they don't eat a whole lot of sugar and they go to bed, to, oh my gosh, this dude is trying to kill us. I don't know who he is, and we have to get the kids safe, and I have to get myself safe. And it is just something very, very visceral and scary about that, especially
Yes.
the scene where she goes into the house. She's not supposed to go into the house.
That's
And
right.
you hear the music, it gets really creepy, and she goes into the house and sees all of her freaking friends are dead. And she's the only one that's left. And that at the end that she has with Michael Myers, spoiler, you folks should have seen this film by now. It came out in
That's right.
'78.
You've had enough time.
Yeah, you've had way enough time, to see this. But how she survives at the end, and not only does she survive at the end, but she manages to protect the two kids as well. But there is
Correct.
just something about, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis, her mother, of course, was Janet Leigh, the original Scream Queen. Her character is always referred to as like the archetype of the quote unquote final girl, the girl who survives, the antagonist in the horror movie. And I am wondering, since you're very very adept at this whole thing with the heroines labyrinth, how would that apply to the horror film genre, especially when it comes to female characters in a horror genre? Because this one, like I said, you cannot call yourself a horror fan unless you have seen Halloween.
Yeah. Well, first off, I absolutely love Halloween 1978. Like you, I was late to the party. My parents were pretty strict, so I was not allowed to see a lot of movies. Yeah, rated R, off limits. But my parents ended up getting a divorce, and for some reason at that point, I was allowed to watch rated R movies. And
Oh,
yeah, so but Halloween was still one that had been delayed for me, and when I finally saw it, I was sometimes movies as they age, if you haven't seen it at the time it came out, it just doesn't quite hit you the same way, right? I've seen movies that people are like, oh, you got to see it, and it's an old movie, and I'm like, that's good, that's a good movie, but it didn't hit me the way it hit them because they saw it at the time it came out. There's context there, and it meant something when it came. But I was very pleased that when I watched Halloween, I was like, oh man, wow, what a movie, what a freaking horror film. There's something completely authentic about those old 70s and 80s movies. The cameras are there, they're closing in on the heroine. She hears something, she thinks she sees something. There's Michael Myers, and there's something like that was very horrifying about his particular brand of like a villain, in the story. He reminded me of Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in that he was very physical. Some horror films, like you think of Nightmare on Elm Street, just the presence of Freddy, with the hand, that's scary enough. And he's not necessarily a big guy, but he's scary and menacing. But with Leatherface and with Michael Myers, these were kind of big guys that wore masks. They were large. They were very physical. When they would enter a room, they would strike quickly. So there was this sort of, you don't have a lot of time to get away from this guy. You think of a lot of those horror films where the heroine or someone's running away, and then the villain is slowly moving in. Michael Myers moved quickly. You might escape the room, but once he was in that room with you, he was coming. You had seconds to get away. So, like you, I saw Halloween 1978 later in life, where I was a little bit older, probably around the same age, in fact, around 15 or 16. And I was not disappointed. And I can watch Halloween anytime, anywhere, and it never gets old. Especially if you get a chance to watch it in October.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. I mean, it's one of those where, like you're saying, it came out in 1978, but you go back and you watch it, and just the way that it's shot, because not only and again, you're right, Michael Myers, he's very large, very physical person. He's gone. Next thing you know, guess what? You left the door open, so guess what? He's behind you. At the same time, strangling, stabbing people, but also with the camera work, because when you see Laurie Strode, it's like you see Michael Myers, but you see him, but you don't really see him at first. And it's just some weird guy. I don't know who they are, but then you start seeing him purposely showing up, and she's trying to decide, who is this person that's following me? So it's like a passing, oh, it's just some weird person, to an actual threat. And something that I thought about that two things that I totally forgot about. And I can't believe it. I've seen this film, I don't know how many times, that I didn't recognize it, or maybe I blinked and missed it. The part where they go into the cemetery and they're looking for Judith Myers's grave and her headstone is missing. I can't believe I missed that, because the part that scared the crap out of me when I first saw this film was when one of her friends is dead, like in bed in the headstone. I'm like, how the heck did he get that,
Yes.
up there? So that's one. And then the other is when Laurie's in class. I think this is the first time that she doesn't know it's Michael. She sees him outside and they're talking about fate. And no matter, and I'm forgetting the actual author who said it, but even no matter how many choices that you make, eventually you wind up having the same fate. And she just kind of rattles it off like it's nothing. And I'm like, I can't believe I didn't catch that.
You know what, though? That's the beautiful thing about a well-made film, that you don't catch everything the first time. And I have ADHD, so there's times I'd watch a film, the third or fourth time, I'm like, just like you, I'm like, how did I miss that? That's such like a great detail, and I missed it. But that's the beautiful thing, is you can rewatch these films and you can unpack them almost endlessly, and they still hold up. That's, to me, the mark of what makes something good versus something that's poorly made. The more you unpack them, the more you start to pull your hair out, because it makes less and less sense the more you unpack it, versus something like this that, like, oh my God, even that little quote in the classroom has echoes the theme, or has meaning there, or the headstone, it's all there for you. You can unpack it endlessly, and it still holds up. In fact, it gets better the more you understand how the filmmaker put the film together, or the story together. Mm-hmm. So don't beat yourself up if you missed it.
Okay, because I'm like, I don't remember this part, and yet that was one of the scariest things to see. Because again, it's just like, how heavy is that darn headstone? But yet, it is up there to the bedroom and purposely, like, well, yeah, because he is a serial killer, pose your victim that way. And seeing that like stuck, because I've never seen anything, like that before.
Right.
Talking about Michael Myers, how big and how physical he is. It's just the fact of women actually feeling vulnerable, because that's what I remember. It's just like, there's some creepy person following you and you don't know who they are or what it is, that you want. And it's just like, am I going to be able to defend myself? Yes or no? I have no idea.
Right. And I definitely have some commentary that I think is totally applicable. And part of it I covered in the book on some level, but you proposing this topic has made me think about it even more. And I think there's plenty to kind of cover there. Okay. One of the things I was going to ask you was, when I hear something like final girl trope, it makes me think that it's a negative. Like we were talking about girl boss. When you say, oh, it's a girl boss, it's like, oh God, like, spare me, like it's become a bad word. And yet most of us like great heroines in our stories. So what is, we were talking about, what is the difference between, a good heroine and a girl, a good girl boss versus these bad girl bosses. Mm-hmm. When you hear final girl, does that strike you as a negative thing?
Oh no. Okay. Because you want to be the one who survives the horror movie. Like, case in point, there's this quiz that's online that I did with a bunch of my girlfriends called Can You Survive a Horror Movie? Ooh. You don't want to be the one who doesn't survive the horror movie. Like stuff like, if you see some guy stalking you, do you go home? Do you go home? Do you go around the corner? Or do you go to the neighbor's house? And somebody said, yeah, I go to the neighbor's house because he thinks that I live there, but I don't really live there. I live somewhere else. So for me, and I think a lot of other fans of horror movies, you want to be well, except for Smile, that's an exception. You didn't
Right.
want to be the final girl in that one. So that one kind of turned the trope on its head. But in general, you want to be the final girl.
You want to survive.
Exactly. You want to survive the horror movie. You want to be the one who's out there, with the axe or whatever, with the blood on it, and you wound up killing the guy or throw him in a meat grinder or whatever. Which is why I think a lot of Blumhouse movies are very interesting, like Happy Death Day, what happened at the end of that one. Freaky, which kind of did a flip on that. There was still Final Girl, even though they were in the body of Vince Vaughn. It was still it was still Final Girl. Nightmare on Elm Street. You want to be the one who survives. That's like the trope, and usually the one that winds up surviving usually isn't, I would say, like the trope of the popular girl or
Right.
the social butterfly. It's always the one who's kind of like on the shelf, just like a wallflower.
Awkward.
No one really awkward. No one really like pays attention to them until stuff starts going sideways.
Well, and I think it speaks, as far as I'm concerned, in a positive sense, toward a wide range of feminine personalities. If you're talking about a final girl, what about the introvert? You're overlooking her, but she's the one that has the survival instinct. I think that's really cool. Because I think in the daily grind, especially if you're younger in high school, the popular girls are the ones that get all the attention. Guys and girls, that we all notice them and everything, and it's easy to be overlooked. So they don't win in these movies. So it kind of flips the social order on its head, because you're saying this isn't high school. This isn't about who the prom queen is, right? Or the prom king or whatever. It's not about being popular. It's not about, a mean girl. It's not about, it's about who has that spark, who has that will to live. And so these introverted girls that are being overlooked have that in a lot of these films. So I think it gives a little bit of credit to the quiet ones, a quiet or introverted person who has that will to survive. I call it an emergent heroine. And I think an emergent heroine is a great heroine. Ripley is my all-time favorite heroine. She's an emergent heroine in her first two films. She's not overlooked in the first film in Alien. She's just kind of one of the crew, all the crew seems to be featured equally. And as the film goes on, she just emerges as the one who's going to fight this thing to the death. Even these capable guy, Parker was probably the most physically capable. You had Dallas with a flamethrower at one point. He goes down. No one makes it. You had Lambert, the Scream Queen. I think she was cast for that role. Victoria. Shoot, I'm forgetting the actress's name. I'm gonna never forgive myself. Anyway, it's
Vasquez.
Veronica. No, it's in the first film.
Oh, in the first one, Veronica Cartwright. Yeah,
Veronica Cartwright. That's it. So she was cast because she is the Scream Queen. So they were subverting that trope even to some extent. Ripley's not a Scream Queen. She didn't scream like she had fear. We see her panicking. We see her abject terror, but she keeps it together long enough to beat this alien. And then in the sequel in Aliens, she is overlooked. And there's a reason for that. She's hanging out with a platoon of hardened colonial Marines, and they don't see her as a warrior. And yet she's the one that has the ability to actually go toe-to-toe with these things. In fact, a queen alien. So, it just, to me, it says, don't overlook, who the heroine or hero might actually be. It might be the unexpected person. And I think that's awesome.
Wow, that's cool. Emergent heroine. I like that, because that seems to be the case more often than not when I watch horror movies. It's like, the popular girl winds up doing something really, really stupid, usually winds up getting killed off first, and it's just like, what?
Right.
You mean they're gone? And then why is it this introverted person seems to know, okay, well, maybe we don't want to go that way.
Yeah.
Why are they coming after us? Do we have any idea? We shouldn't split up.
Yeah.
Even though people want to split up, it's like, no, I don't think we should split up. No, I'm not staying here. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what happens. It happens in the Saw movies a lot.
Yeah. I love when they are like, we should split up. It's like, there's no pushback on that, like from any character. Because if I was
No.
in a survival situation, my first instinct would be like, the last thing we should do is split up. We should stay together, But
That's one of
also,
the reasons. Oh, sorry,
go
guys.
ahead. Good.
No, I was going to say that's one of the reasons why just the first Scream movie, why I like the first Scream movie, because they were saying, no, we can't split up. Do you know that's how we get killed off?
Yeah.
They'll pick us off, one by one. So it's like, okay, that's a good acknowledgement.
Yeah, they would call
Um,
today. They would call that meta. A certain like kind of self-awareness outside the story where they're
mhm.
actually making fun of the tropes within the film, and I thought that was I love that actually when it's done correctly. It can be a classic, and I think they nailed it with Scream.
So thinking back, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say too that horror films do tap into what's a primal situation. This isn't heavy on plot, right? A horror story. There's an immediate threat, and for whatever reason, based on the film or the story, certain avenues of safety are slowly or one by one cut off, and
Mm,
you're in a survival situation. So that's a different type of story just by itself. So whether it's a male or a female, I remember when I was younger, if I would walk to my car with keys in the back of my head, I would always imagine that, like, if someone's chasing me, can I get the key in the car and open it fast enough to get in the, like, you just play these little head games because we're wired to survive. We're wired to like keep our head on a swivel. And so here
mhm.
you're watching this movie, you're not just simulating. Like, boom, there's the guy. He's in the room. You got to get out of there now. And she's trying to. And so that primal factor in the survival situation, I think, is quite a hook. It's hard to escape the allure to it. I know people who won't. I think Retro Nerd Girl, she doesn't like watching horror because it's too unnerving to even watch.
She doesn't like zombie movies. She doesn't like those.
So, but because it's a little too close to home, it's too unsettling to watch, because of that primal. It's on that primal nerve.
Yeah, exactly. And now that you say that, that's probably a reason why. Have you seen the movie Megan?
Yes, I have.
That
I liked
one,
it.
I love that movie so darn much.
Oh, cool. I didn't know which way you were going to go with it.
No. I talk about that movie all the time because coming from a technical background, I was already fascinated with watching the film, but I'm watching it and I'm just like, you did what? No, that's the thing. You don't do that. You didn't see that? Did you not see how Megan reacted right there? That's not code. That shouldn't happen. And
Yeah, there's a glitch.
it's just like that is so, not a glitch, but it's like an everyday thing, like a doll. And this is probably another horror trope too. Probably, if you've ever watched the Conjuring series, I'll get back to it.
I love the first one. The first film is so good. It's one of my favorite. It's actually become one of my favorites, especially for a more modern film.
Oh yeah, like the Conjuring, and then of course they have Annabelle. There's something because girls who play with dolls, that's such a bond of imagination, and to have that turn
True.
on you, whether it's this old, like, say, glass doll like Annabelle, or if it's a robot like Megan, that interaction is still there, and to have that actually turn on you is a really, really scary scary thing.
That's a great angle on that. I don't know if I've ever thought about that the driving force behind some of the horror films, the idea that you have this innocent and playful imagination that turns on you. That is just the way you worded that. That's very compelling. And I think you're totally right. And I think that's what makes it the most scary. It is supposed, Megan was supposed to be her like friend. It was supposed to be like a stand-in for a friend and someone that she could relate to and talk to and not feel so alone. And play with, right? I think when they first introduced Megan, it's in this room and it's like toys are in there and there's like a tea set, or I can't even remember, but I do remember it was like a playroom. And so you're right. Megan was supposed to be something that is play space, which is fun and safe and imaginative. And you're right. The kids that have that extra imagination, to see it turn against them, that is part of the compelling drive of those horror stories.
Yeah, it's just that visceral fear, especially for girls or like even for boys, like having your toys turn against you. It's just like that's a little too real. You're kind of giving, your stuffed animals or dolls a side eye, like
we're cool, right? Well, I remember even in Poltergeist. Remember in Poltergeist, that clown?
Oh, that freaked me out.
That's so, good. Halloween's one of them. Poltergeist is another one where I still feel a little on the edge of my seat with it. And what's funny is if you rewatch Poltergeist, you'll realize that the film, I never really knew this until I tried to study it, but it seems to have like a couple fake resolutions. Like I always thought that the bad stuff started and they went to war with it and then it got settled. No, they kind of go to war with it and they solve it. Then they go to war with it again, and then and then it makes a comeback, and then now they're really so the scene with the clown actually happens later after, like, I think in round 3. I'll never forget. He sets it on that chair, right, and then he's unsettled by it, and that's very relatable. As a kid, like you said, you give your toys the side eye. He's kind of giving it the side eye. So he takes a jacket and he throws the jacket over it. And he's like, okay, as long as the clown's not looking at me, I feel comfortable. Okay. And then he takes one more look and it's gone. And he does the thing that you're not supposed to do. He looked under the bed.
Yes.
That's worse. Oh man, but yeah, you're right. Fearing your own toys is not cool. That's where Chucky comes from. You're right, Annabelle.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why so many people, including myself, as soon as we saw the ads for Megan, we're like, "Oh my gosh, it's like Chucky with an upgrade."
Yes, with that creepy face and that weird dance she does. She had that weird dance.
That was it. Oh my gosh. That's like, what was I telling someone? Sometimes you have to offset extreme horror with dark humor at the same time. So that was not what anybody expected. And then, with the paper shredder, she pulls that thing off. It's like, okay, this is not good.
It's funny you're mentioning Megan. I need to rewatch. It's perfect month to do it, to kind of go back on any horror films I've been itching to see. I'll definitely rewatch Halloween. But I think Megan's gonna be on that list because I loved it. But I haven't seen. I think it's been a year since I've seen Megan.
Well, that one, I love that one. But another one, I know I'm kind of hopping genres, but
that's okay.
Like women in horror movies, it's that whole final girl thing. It's like haven't really heard it talked about a lot, and that like fascinates me. Another example where, like I said, you didn't want to be the final girl. And considering the sequel is coming out, this is why this is interesting to me, is the movie Smile.
Yes.
That movie, psychological horror freaks me out more so than like slasher pictures. And to have this young woman who's a therapist and who she's trying to help people, and she sees this young lady basically goes from, on the edge of psychosis
Yes.
to having this weird smile on her face, and then winds up, committing suicide in front of her. And it turns out that there's this entity that sticks to her, and she keeps seeing things and she doesn't know how to get rid of it, and she keeps seeing it everywhere, and so many crazy jump scares with that.
Yeah.
And
but
at the end, oh, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, and at the end, you don't want her to be the final girl, but it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't want her to be the final girl. But it's interesting because instead of the final girl, she's the final girl, but in actuality, it's the final guy.
Right.
Where that ends. And that is just a really crazy twist to that film.
Well, and I thought that those scenes actually really, because we're at an age, I feel like, where we've seen it, we've done it. It's hard to get the same rise out of audiences. In film, I think it's just more challenging because we've seen a lot of stuff, and CGI is pretty much shown us whatever we can imagine. We've tried it now at this point. So when someone's like, yeah, there's a new scary film coming out, it could be like, is it really, how new is it? What are you going to do? That's so but Smile was good. And I thought that the scenes that you were just talking about inside the psychiatrist's office, or the, I guess they're a psychiatrist,
psych ward.
I think, social worker.
I think she was in a psych ward. I think something like that. Yeah. Like college. I think probably like a college.
Mental health,
like mental health, something like that. Yeah.
And those scenes, I believe, really sold the movie because it's very disturbing and unnerving. But also there is some, because I did see the trailer for the sequel. There's just something creepy about someone staring at you and smiling at you, even if it wasn't a creepy smile. It becomes creepy because they're staring at you, right? Like you look over and someone's looking at you, you're like, what's this person want? What do they want?
Do I know you?
They're obviously wanting attention. And I would imagine it's even worse for girls, I would imagine. But, someone staring at you and giving you unwanted attention, that could be unnerving. And if they're smiling, that adds that creepy factor. And here they've kind of weaponized it for the horror film, where it's like a deliberately creepy smile, and they're deliberately staring at you, and it's unnerving, and they turn that into a horror trope for their film. It's amazing.
And I was talking with the Retro Nerd Girl, and we saw Psycho. We were watching that. I said, "Do you notice at the end when Norman hears his mother's voice?" And his face changes. And at the end, he's got this creepy smile on his face. I'm like, I can't believe I didn't put those two together. To see that's the same poster that they used for the movie. It's like, how can a smile be creepy? What are you talking about? Of course, I saw the movie. Then I saw Psycho, and I'm like, okay, that was the creepy transformation scene where you actually saw his personality change. And I'm like, okay, that may be where they got that from. It matches up too well in a way. I just thought that was fascinating.
And to the idea of being watched, right? Someone's watching you or staring at you. In Halloween, the scene that always got me was she's walking home, and there's that big hedge wall, and he's kind of standing half in, half out, and she kind of sees him, and then she looks again, and he's gone. That I always thought that was a little unnerving because he was attempting to even hide. So there's something predatorial about that. Someone who's kind of like half camouflaged, keeping an eye on you, and they see that you see that, like these are unnerving things. So the idea of being watched is part of a lot of these horror films, even in Scream, where he's like, I can see you, I can see you. And, she's looking around, what window is he looking at? It's unnerving and I think from a primal standpoint, it's predator and prey, because that's why little animals hide in it. You don't know if the predator has spotted you. So when you watch like a squirrel in your front yard, they're like, they're constant, their heads on a swivel, because if they're spotted, that could be it. And I think we still have that in there. So when someone's telling you, or when you see the predator in, civil society, instinctively to be on your guard. But then, polite society is like, we're fine, right? We're fine. There's no danger. And the heroine's always like, I think there's still danger here. I think that guy's off. I think there's something wrong with him. The guy hiding behind the hedge wall in the suit and the mask. My nerves are up.
The suit and the mask, and again, you brought up Scream, because this is before we actually meet Ghostface, and of course Drew Barrymore, the best 5 minutes I've ever seen in a horror movie, where she shows up and it's like, what's your favorite scary movie? Da da da. Yeah, this is great. Da 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 da. Well, why do you want to know X, Y, and Z? And the voice on the phone, because I want to see what I'm looking at. And then it's just like, oh my gosh, he's been watching me the whole, it instantly that turns, and you go from being, oh, well, I'm safe in my house, to I'm not safe in my house at all.
Right. So one of the things that I wanted to address, or come at it from a different angle, might be kind of just a different take on the final girl. And again, I try to find the positive in these things. I have heard some takes on the final girl that are laughably bad. They try to turn it into something really negative. And what I see is, there's society changes and values can change. And so I think in the old days, you had kind of these virginal heroines who screamed a lot and were very inactive and didn't do much to fight back, and then that started to change. And that's a good thing. You're getting an evolution of these heroines, but you're also getting a little glimpse of what at the time they thought, what values should a heroine model? If she's going to be the final girl, she should be a girl we like, right? I think that was the thinking behind the virginal, that she should be a role model. And then other women or other writers, I should say, or critics were like, well, why? Why does she have to be like this? So can't we tell a story about, a girl that's not like this, that's more promiscuous, let's say, or just, likes to live and likes variety? Can't she be the final girl? Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do all these things have in common, though? They're heroines, and they're fighting against a menacing figure inside or near the home, and they're the ones who survive. So it doesn't really matter necessarily, from my standpoint, which values she espouses, on what her preferences are, or what she likes, whether she's an introvert or an extrovert. There's a spectrum of personalities for women and men. There's a spectrum of personalities. So any one of them can be the final girl. And I think it is fun to explore different personalities to see, what about this, maybe what about this fashion Cosmo girl? What can she be the last girl? Sure she could. So I'm fine with some of these older tropes, even if they're less flattering, not because I want them to be unflattering, but because we're seeing one take on this. We're seeing one effort at telling the story, and this happens to be the heroine they came up with at the time. Beautiful thing is, we can write stories right now that don't do that. So if you don't like an old trope, then you try to write something that doesn't have that trope in it. And who knows, maybe you'll come up with something we haven't seen yet and wow us. So I'm all for that. So the one thing that I wanted to address, and I think this is kind of a fun exercise. It was fun for me when you framed it. as the final girl, because you were like, well, let's dig into that a little bit. Let's check it out. And the first thing that came up to mind was, and so I did a little research on this. One of the archetypes, and it's a prime archetype in the Heroine's Labyrinth, is called Home as Battleground or Invasion of the Inner Sanctum. And even in the book, I'll just give you the tarot card I used is it's a burning household, so it's a house on fire. Mm-hmm. And I noticed, and this is the beautiful part, there's a stronger, besides the tropes in horror, there's actually a strong relationship between heroines and compromised home, compromised inner sanctums, that the household itself is where the villain is, that the household is where you're supposed to feel safe. And this is why I think this archetype is so powerful. The more I think about it, the more I've tried to articulate it, the more I even, could feel my blood rise when I really think about it, because I do think it's so primal. In fact, I try to paint a picture in the story where the idea of we've had dreams like this. In your dream, there's something passing close to you, and you hope it doesn't see you. It's some sort of a predatorial presence, and your heart's racing. You're scared. You don't want to move because you'll give yourself away. And the second you give yourself away, it's a race out of there. It's a fight to the finish. So there's something really scary about that moment, and it comes from the animal world, right? It's a primal part of our mind. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to spot it in horror films with the final girl or a lead heroine, but I think the relationship to it actually goes a lot further. Because you will find heroines in compromised homes in all sorts of genres. It does not matter. And I think that that's profound. It was profound enough for me to include it, and it makes sense. And the reason it's so important is because in a lot of stories, that becomes part of that climax. Because here's the safe space of the world, right? Or the home. This is supposed to be safe. Well, now it's compromised. What do you do? What do you do if the home is compromised? It could be a family member that's the villain. It could be, somebody who's come into the home like a home invader, like Michael Myers. But the idea that the home has been compromised is terrifying, and heroines suddenly become the defender of this inner space. And this is important because the heroine is often up to this challenge, whether she has combat training. The way I mention it in the book is whether she's wearing an evening dress or full armor regalia. She's willing to it may start from a survival instinct, but she has to restore the home. She has to restore the sanctity of the home space. And you do that by this confrontation. So, in fact, when I discuss the Heroine's Labyrinth, I refer to horror as the Heroine's Labyrinth on steroids. It takes all of the nuance out of the Heroine's Labyrinth, and it focuses on only the most primal elements of the archetypal journey. So, and the compromised home space is often the climax. So whether it's Jane Eyre or Pride and Prejudice, or Their Eyes Were Watching God, the heroines are at home when they're dealing with bad actors, bad people. The Color Purple is actually an example where I talk about all the villains of that story are inside the home and share that space with Celie Johnson. So, she's not dealing with some danger way out there. This isn't a hero's journey for her. So her problems are proximate and intimate. And horror stories take that and max it out. And they put a mask on. So the identity of the villain is less important in horror stories, and so the mask really is masking their humanity, and they're a pure animal, attacking. So you talk about Halloween. Laurie Strode's home is what is compromised. The homes of her friends are what are compromised. These safe spaces are the doors are kicked in. There's terror inside the home, and that is very important. So one of the things I was going to do is point out how often you see heroines dealing with compromised homes in stories, even if it's not a horror story. And so the reason I wanted to do this is draw that relationship between the heroine and that sort of a scenario, and show that horror, it goes beyond just horror. And it actually is something that heroines deal with all the time. Horror is just the worst case scenario of that. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
So, so I have a couple screenshots just to point out how many heroines in a home space where the home is threatened. Here, let me put this. Let me see. Let me present. Window. See if that works. Can you see that?
Yep, I do see it. Yep, there we go.
So yeah, so Star Wars. You know, we think about it from Luke's point of view. He's going to go fight the Empire. He's got to go slay the dragon, which is the Death Star. Who is the only character in this entire film whose home is threatened by the Empire directly? Not just the one homestead by stormtroopers, but the entire planet. It's Princess Leia.
Right.
We're with Princess Leia when we witness the full firepower of the Death Star. It unleashes and it blows up Alderaan, which is her home. So Princess Leia, it's not just, you know, the bad militant guys out there. These people are threatening the place she grew up in, her actual home, and she has to sit there and watch it get blown up. Avatar, Neytiri, it's called Home Tree, and
okay, yeah, all right.
Yes, she is. It's called Home Tree. It is a sacred place. It's an ancient tree, and it's gigantic. It's the size of like the Burge Tower. It's gigantic. It's a beautiful tree, and people come into this space. They unload a bunch of missiles, and this tree comes down, and she has to watch her home get destroyed right in front of her eyes. And that's what she's looking at right now. The tree is about to collapse, so she's watching her home space get destroyed. And Avatar's not a horror film, but it's a similar problem that she's facing. Barbie, which is a brand new film, Barbie's a big one, and it's very debatable which side they come down on. But I think it's considered to be a feminist film, so you would imagine that they're going to break all the tropes. They're not going to do it, and yet Barbie's dream house is compromised in the film. Ken kind of turns against Barbie for a while, and that's a shot of him occupying her dream house. It's now his I forgot what he calls it, like casa
dojo casa. The part, and it's so funny when I think about it, the part of the movie that I just really, really felt like I was gasping out loud was when he's throwing her clothes out and they freeze the frame and they say what it's from, what year, and what collection. I'm like, is he really throwing your stuff at it? I'm like, wow, it's really that's really
totally. Well, you're right, but he is taking over her house. Barbie comes back to find that her dream home is no longer her own. So even in a modern feminist take, they have not gotten away from this trope. You could change things here and there, but the resonance of having your home space compromised is still there. It's still very present. And part of the goal of the second half of the film is for her to restore the order of Barbie, of not only Barbie Land, but of her own home, which she ends up doing. Coraline, the danger is proximate, right?
Yeah. Yes, with the other mother.
She finds the secret door, and what she really finds is an entire doppelganger of her house. It's like her house. It's got the same rooms and everything. Same parents are there, but it's a doppelganger. So Coraline, even though this has maybe some horror style tropes, I don't think people think of Coraline as a horror film. And yet it has a lot of the same patterns to it. Her home has been compromised. It's her mother or her other mother that presents the biggest danger in this film. And it's right behind the wall. Everything Everywhere All at Once, another film that's very modern. It just came out.
I love that.
Yes, just came out. Oh, you haven't seen it?
I've seen it. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, my point is, so she's living kind of a mundane life, but it's in her house. She's able to travel to all sorts of these parallel universes, like a multiverse. And yet all the people she's dealing with are still the people in her small sphere. It's her, not just her husband, it's her alpha husband. Her daughter's the big villain in this. You know, the IRS agent becomes a villain at one point.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's the home space. And Everything Everywhere All at Once is not a horror film, and yet we still see a heroine dealing with the compromised inner sanctum of where she lives every single day. Furiosa, another film that I think took strong feminist takes, yet she's still dealing with her native culture there. She tries to save the brides that are in there, but it is her own, it's the leader of her own culture that she's up against, and she must free the inhabitants of her home space. Again, this is an action film instead of horror, but it's the same general scenario. The home space is compromised, and her goal at the end is to free the people from this malevolent presence at home. Even Scarlett O'Hara. I had to find the right pictures here. So there's a couple things. One, that's down there at the bottom. You can see the silhouettes. Her home is Atlanta. And there's Atlanta burning to the ground. So she's not safe there in this war story. And she ends up dealing with she kills one person in the film. And it is someone who invades her home. There's a Union soldier who's a deserter.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens? He enters her home without permission. He begins to rifle through her stuff, and that's when she first sees him, and she's got a pistol in her hand, and she ends up shooting this man, but he's inside her home. And I don't think people think of Gone with the Wind as a horror story either. And yet, here we go again. The Handmaid's Tale, another one that I would call a feminist storytelling, where you see that the home space by the lead character Offred is compromised as well. And this one is the entire culture is pretty much weaponized along, I think, like a menacing religious culture that is very aggressive toward women.
Yeah, I read the book.
Oh, you have? I have not read it.
Years ago.
So the Hunger Games, we have another the first action hero, Lorena.
Yes, the first.
She broke the mold. But here again, she's at home, right? And she's hunting in her space there in District 12. And is it District 12, right? Or District?
I think it's 12.
I think it is in Pan Am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But again, malevolent forces come into this space. They actually take her sister first, and she offers to replace her sister in her stead. But you see, she's surrounded by what look like menacing authority figures. They're taking her from her home. Again, it's the home space that is the most dangerous place for her. This one I didn't have a great screenshot, but again, this is an old literature. This is Jane Eyre. She's inside the house of Mr. Rochester. Right?
I saw this. This, and I actually read the book.
Yes, I have read the book. I read it for my studies. And I was surprised to find a lot of the same tropes in Jane Eyre. So I was, when you mentioned the final girl, I was like, does Jane Eyre? I was like, yes, the home is compromised. There's a hidden villain, Bertha, inside the house. It's in fact, and in fact, I think they call it it's another trope, the mad woman in the attic scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Bertha comes down and sets fire to Mr. Rochester's room, and it is the heroine that goes in there to rescue him. So, she is the knight in shining armor in this scene. And, but again, it's the home space that is compromised. Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill. We have two films where she goes on this revenge quest. Where is the center of the maze for her? It's a affluent residential home. And inside the home is not only her daughter that she didn't know was alive, but Bill, the villain of the entire story. So I just found it fascinating that even one of our baddest ass women, Beatrix Kiddo, her final battle is inside of a home where her child is. And a former lover of hers is the villain, approximate villain, once again, inside the home. Clarice Starling, the center of the maze for her. It's not her home, but it is once again a residential house in, an unassuming suburb. And inside this home is Buffalo Bill, the serial killer. She's in a regular house. It looks, it used to be Mrs. Littman's house. Everyone knew her or whatever. So, and when she descends into the basement, there's an entire maze down there. It becomes a horror film by the time she goes down into the basement.
I remember that. Oh,
yeah. And the Terminator. The Terminator, if you follow the Terminator, he attacks the wrong Sarah Connor. She opens the door. There's that little safety chain that make us feel better, in hotels, and boom, kicks that open and kills her. He invades Sarah's home, shoots the roommate and the boyfriend, but he's looking for Sarah Connor, so her house is not safe for her either. In the Terminator, in fact, the Terminator, I think, steps it up because she even goes to the police, which you would think is even safer than the home. This guy blows through the police station to go get her. And then The Color Purple, which we talked about, the villain, her villains, the people that terrorize her are inside the home. Her home is compromised. And this is an ongoing problem with Celie in several different homes. So once again, she's not dealing necessarily with an outsider. The villain is proximate, and I don't think The Color Purple is a film that people would put in the horror genre. It's not, but we still see this relationship between heroines and their household, those inner sanctums that are supposed to be so safe.
Right, because she said, I remember her saying this at the end when she's getting ready to leave with Suge Avery. Yep. and her husband, and Celie tells her abusive husband, the prison that you meant for me is the one that you're going to rot in.
Yes, that's that. In fact, I had that as a quote in one of my opening chapters because I love that line and it's so important. Oh, wow. But I found out that you can't use quotes. It's considered intellectual property.
Okay.
So her quote, that quote you just said, was one of my chapter headers. In fact, I think it was for Home is Battleground. For this chapter of the book, it was her quote. So I just wanted to point out that Final Girl, it's not for nothing. I think heroines have been up against this problem over and over and over again in all genres. And here in the horror genre at its most primal level, who ends up on top? A heroine, a heroine. So I don't find that to be a reductive thing. I find that to be extremely heroic because I think vindicating or liberating the home can be the hardest thing a hero or a heroine can do. It's tough. These are people you're supposed to trust. You standing up to these people could disrupt the social order, as we're witnessing in this exact shot. The heroine risks a lot to challenge a disguised or hidden villain. So I think the reason it ends up in horror is because it resonates to men and women alike. And I do think that in the end, we are relieved when the heroine makes it. And I do think we see her as heroic for what she's accomplished.
Absolutely. This is such a great point. And I kind of want to wrap it up with.
Oh, I had a couple. I'm sorry, I stopped. But
did you have some more?
No, big. I had WandaVision and Titanic. Again, Titanic was interesting because her family follows her on the boat. It's still her. It's like her household. It's her mother that's menacing her, and then her suitor, Cal. The dashing, fiance, the groom. He shoots at her by the end of the film. And then WandaVision is also in her home in that film. I'll give WandaVision credit for the beginning of the series, which I thought was really
Mhm.
excellent.
I agree. I like the first part of it. Yeah.
Maybe the first 4 or 5 episodes were actually excellent, and where she senses something's not right, where she's
Mhm.
suspicious of her home and not too sure of herself, and there's these little clues. And anytime I'm watching a film and I see this intuitive response from a heroine where she's beginning to where the camera closes in and you could tell that she's not sensing that something's right, it clicks for me because I'm like, something's not right close to home,
Mhm.
and she's on it. you know.
Something's not right. No, no. Another and a bring it back to like the horror genre.
Yeah.
I loved The Conjuring. The family moves into the
Yes.
house, and mother realizes the house is not safe, and she's pleading for help. No one seems to be able to help her until she finds the Warrens, and they
Yes.
agree,
And she's desperate.
to help her. Yeah, that she's absolutely desperate. It's just like and I'm thinking it's like she has to go back to that house, and it's not safe for her, and more importantly, it's not safe for her family, especially her children.
Well, and she ends up
And
getting possessed, right?
yes.
So to me, that is so I call it a poisoned apple. It's another trope, but and I don't want to get in. We don't have to get into it in depth, but the idea is that the heroine, her free will is subverted, and this is done in many different ways. The poisoned apple is the easy one to see, uh, but it's internal. There's something internal. A needle is one of the most common tropes. You'll see like the spinning wheel or the needle syringe, or Coraline has the button eyes. She's possessed. So when you think about it, not only is the home compromised, but this malevolent force compromises her. It's the worst possible scenario for the heroine. So and she has to go through this, and it's pretty gruesome watching her, almost like the Exorcist type scenario, which was
Yeah,
another hero. That was a girl.
we're gonna have to talk about this. I like the idea of the poison apple. We have definitely got to do another
Yes,
to talk
poison apple is a big one.
that. Talk about that. But yeah, thank you so much, Doug, for talking about this. Because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm like, why is it that this whole thing with Final Girl, it's always been a very positive trope that I run into, something that I love seeing in horror movies, and a theme that seemed to continuously happen in horror movies. So what you've just discussed, and of course the examples that you brought up, I think that's so cool.
Yeah, the horror genre is excuse me. The horror genre is the heroine story, which we've seen across spectrums: historical fiction, the epics, adventure stories, dramas. Um, but it's stripped down, and it focuses on this battle that takes place inside the home, in which the heroine turns out to be the person we need to liberate the home, to save us. So she doesn't matter if she's screaming. It doesn't matter if she's ill-suited for combat. To me, it doesn't matter. She gets the job done. So you could say, oh, she doesn't come across it. Like I think of Wendy Torrance in The Shining. She's often
Mm.
a great example of a heroine that's like, oh, we don't like her because she's crying a lot. She doesn't come across as heroic. She wins. She beats Jack Torrance. She steps up she goes toe to toe with this menacing, terrible guy. Again, he's her own husband. He's inside what are supposed to be the safest places. And The Shining is a horror story. So heroines, don't underestimate them. It doesn't matter where they come from, what their background is, whether they're introverted or extroverted. They rise to this challenge, and it's a horrifying challenge. And the final girl, I think, is there for a reason.
All right. Well, that seems like the perfect spot to end this. Folks, let us know in the comments, what do you think about this final girl trope and the whole thing of, where it comes down to it, it's the heroine's labyrinth on steroids, that whole thing of protecting the home. So we definitely want to hear from you on that. So, Doug, where can people find you?
You can find me on X. I've been dipping my toe in there and kind of having fun. There's a lot of people on X, and I've been bumping into other YouTubers on there and other industry professionals and friends. So Douglas A. Burton. You can find me there. My website, you could find out a little bit more about me, douglasaburton.com. And I will be launching a YouTube channel soon. So if you want to subscribe, you can go there now. It's Douglas A. Burton. There's nothing there for you yet, but that will change this month. So
All
I'm looking
right.
over launch.
All right. Well, we're going to help kickstart that off. So we're going to have that link to Doug's YouTube channel in the description of this video. So you guys can go there and be one of the first to get on the ground floor with his channel. So I want to thank you, Doug, so much for being on. Cannot wait to have you back on again so we can talk some more. I'm fascinated with film and literature, and I just love your takes.
Well, thank you. I wanted to say thank you for having me on. I love talking with you. It's so fun.
Well, likewise, I have a blast hanging out with you. Folks, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to Douglas A. Burton, and we will see you next time. Bye.